What if the promises you've clung to weren't yours to claim in the first place? What if all the talk about freedom, choice, and power in your hands has always been more ceremony than truth? Rituals performed to keep you loyal to a structure that never truly needed your permission? The idea of democracy sounds noble, ancient, sacred even. It conjures images of voices rising in unison, people steering their own future, ballots cast in dignity. But beneath that romantic surface lies a mechanism far more calculated, far more manipulative than we're comfortable admitting. The man they now revere as one of philosophy's cornerstones, Aristotle's mentor, didn't simply ponder ideals from a distance. He lived through the unraveling of the very system we now glorify. Plato witnessed it firsthand, the decay of a government that claimed to serve its people, yet ultimately devoured its greatest minds. He didn't write of democracy with admiration. He approached it with a surgeon's precision, carving away the mythology to expose the rot beneath, and what he discovered was unsettling, so much so that even today it feels like a threat to speak it aloud. He didn't hate the notion of liberty. What terrified him was the chaos that unfolds when liberty is wielded without understanding. He saw his mentor, Socrates, a man devoted to reason, to dialogue, to the pursuit of wisdom, dragged through the dirt by public opinion and executed not by an emperor, but by everyday citizens emboldened by the illusion of moral superiority. This wasn't tyranny by sword, it was death by popularity. And that for Plato was the real nightmare, a world where intellect is drowned out by applause, where truth is a liability and spectacle is rewarded. He recognized something we still refuse to confront. When every person holds equal political power, but vastly unequal knowledge, the stage doesn't belong to the wise. It belongs to those who shout the loudest. The most persuasive voice isn't always the most informed, it's the one that entertains, that comforts, that flatters. And in such a world, leadership becomes less about vision and more about volume. We still dress up this performance as democracy. We still pretend that casting a ballot makes us rulers of our fate. But step back. Do you really decide who leads you? Or do you select from a pair of polished candidates, sculpted by institutions you've never seen, with messages engineered to sound just like you want them to? You're given options, sure. But were you ever part of the design? Or are you simply participating in a script that was handed to you already finished? Plato foresaw this. Long before the rise of big data, before propaganda came with jingles and tweets, he understood the anatomy of the mob. The collective, when untethered from discipline, becomes a creature of appetite, not principle. It devours nuance. It despises complexity. It seeks comfort above all else. And when that craving grows loud enough, it silences anything that asks too many questions. He watched democracy tear itself apart, not by external invasion, but by internal erosion. Athens, once a jewel of culture, art, and debate, fell to the very tools it celebrated. As soon as popularity outweighed wisdom, as soon as entertainment replaced thought, the structure began to crack. The people, convinced of their righteousness, destroyed what had once made them strong. In his writings, Plato describes democracy not as a victory of the people, but as a fragile illusion barely holding back catastrophe. He likens it to a vessel adrift on the sea, its crew arguing over who should steer, though none have learned the stars, the tides, or the map. They bicker, they shout, they wrest control from each other, each convinced their instincts are superior. Meanwhile, the one person aboard who understands the journey, the philosopher, is cast aside, mocked, labeled a bore, too slow, too abstract, too unsettling. And so the ship doesn't just drift, it begins to spiral, with no anchor in truth, with no compass of wisdom. The only direction left is reaction. Whoever yells loudest gets the wheel. Whoever stirs the strongest feelings gets applause. But storms aren't weathered by feelings. They're survived by skill. This, Plato believed, was the terminal phase of democratic freedom, where liberty transforms into noise and noise demands a savior. Eventually, the people, exhausted by the chaos they unknowingly fed, cry out for order. They plead for someone to end the uncertainty, to bring clarity back to their lives. And when that moment arrives, the one who answers isn't the sage, it's the seducer. Not through violence, but charm. The tyrant walks onto the stage. He doesn't seize control. He's invited, welcomed, praised. He tells the people what they already whisper to themselves. He validates their anger. He blames their enemies. He speaks not from knowledge, but from instinct, echoing their emotions like a mirror. And the crowd, desperate for direction, hands him everything. That's the great irony. The very system designed to protect freedom opens the gates for its destruction. It's not sabotage, it's seduction. The applause becomes the anthem of its undoing. This is the danger Plato chronicled, a danger not born of dictatorship, but of a crowd that thinks it's awake while sleepwalking, because when everyone's opinion is elevated equally, regardless of understanding, leadership ceases to be about merit. It becomes a performance, a spectacle, a carefully curated show. And in this show, we are not the audience. We are the cast, repeating lines we never wrote, defending positions we never examined, living inside a drama choreographed by forces far beyond our sight. In Plato's eyes, democracy was the beginning of a slide, not towards liberty, but toward a clever form of control disguised as freedom. Not control through whips or chains, but through dopamine, through emotion, through the manipulation of what feels good. Today, the tools of persuasion are sharper, far sharper than anything Plato could have imagined. Your preferences, your fears, your insecurities, they're all mapped and stored. You are no longer just a citizen. You are a data point, a reaction to be anticipated, a pattern to be optimized. Before your vote is even cast, your preferences are simulated, your behavior is modeled. Algorithms have already tested dozens of messages to find the one that makes you click, not cheer. The speech you think moved you. It was drafted with the help of machines that know what resonates in your heart better than you do. We call this progress, but to Plato, it would be prophecy fulfilled. And as the cheering grows, so does the blindness. Because in a system like this, truth is not a value, it's an obstacle. Reality is only tolerated if it matches the narrative that wins. If it doesn't, it's dismissed as offensive, labeled dangerous, buried under hashtags and slogans. Because the crowd doesn't seek truth, it seeks affirmation. We choose leaders the same way we choose playlists based on mood. We select based on how someone makes us feel, not whether they possess vision, depth, or clarity. We want to be told we're right. We want to be told our enemies are wrong. We want to hear that we are the heroes, the enlightened ones, the virtuous. So we reward the candidate who delivers that fantasy, not the one who confronts us with uncomfortable truths, but the one who flatters our assumptions. We don't ask if their plans are feasible. We ask if their story matches our emotion. This is no longer politics. It's marketing. It's narrative manipulation. It's dopamine management masquerading as leadership. And the most terrifying part, we call this participation. We call this empowerment. But tell me, have your choices ever disrupted the system? Or have they only rotated the mask? Year after year, cycle after cycle, you choose between carefully vetted personas. You're given the illusion of revolution, the illusion of change, but the structure, the machine, remains untouched. And so long as you believe in that illusion, it stays alive. The greatest trick isn't censorship, it's distraction. Not silencing truth, but drowning it in noise. Not banning dissent, but flooding your mind with so many signals you forget what truth even feels like. By the time you recognize the pattern, the applause has already drowned out the alarms. That is where we are now. And this is only the beginning. The illusion is clever because it never demands that you surrender. It convinces you that you already have control. It doesn't bark orders. It hands you a ballot and lets you feel heroic. You don't hear chains because they're made of praise. You're told you're wise, that your voice matters, that this time your choice counts. But look deeper. The people you choose from didn't come from your community, your neighborhood, or your vision. They came from boardrooms, foundations, and corporate scripts. The system selects who gets to stand on stage, and you're handed the remote with 2 preloaded options. That's not liberty. That's a carefully staged performance. Plato saw the first act of this drama play out when Athens began to crumble from within. A culture built on reason, debate, and inquiry turned its back on the very minds that once elevated it. Sophistry took the place of philosophy. The crowd stopped asking what was right and started asking what sounded good. The thinkers were drowned out by performers, and the truth-tellers were punished for being inconvenient. He watched this and understood the pattern. When a society no longer honors truth as a virtue, it begins to worship personality, not character, persona, not substance, symbolism. Politics becomes poetry, not policy. Leaders aren't selected for their courage or insight. They're chosen for their ability to perform the emotional script of the moment. And the crowd, lost in its own reflection, forgets that the mirror lies. This isn't just an ancient problem dressed in modern clothing. This is a cycle, a pattern as old as civilization, and we, in our so-called modern age, have not escaped it. We've perfected it. Today, the process of being controlled doesn't involve brute force. It's far more elegant. You are guided by feeling, not fear. The system whispers, not shouts. It doesn't lock doors. It paints them with inspirational slogans. It tells you you're empowered while carefully narrowing your field of vision. It doesn't ban your voice. It overwhelms it with curated outrage, addictive dopamine loops, and comforting half-truths. So you scroll, you argue, you post, you feel alive. But underneath, the machinery hums undisturbed, untouched by your digital defiance. The real levers of power are shielded from the noise, and the louder the crowd cheers or rages, the less it notices that the script never changes. Plato warned us that this moment would come, a time when the masses, intoxicated by emotion and addicted to affirmation, would no longer seek what is good, but what feels good. And in that craving, they would become easy to control. Not because they are weak, but because they are constantly distracted. A distracted public never rebels. It reacts, it consumes, it obeys without realizing it. Democracy, in his eyes, was not inherently evil. It was vulnerable to emotion, to manipulation, to the seductive power of flattery. And when a population chooses leaders based on charm, spectacle, and simplicity, the result is not leadership, it's entertainment with consequences. That's how tyrants arrive. Not marching in with tanks, but strolling in with applause. They don't impose, they reassure. They don't silence, they soothe. They tell the people, "I see you," and the people cheer. They promise to fix what feels broken, and the crowd, weary of noise and desperate for meaning, throws their arms around the very thing that will eventually cage them. And here's the most disturbing truth: the crowd asked for it. That's the irony that keeps repeating throughout history. Societies that demand endless choice and unchecked expression always drift into chaos. And when the chaos becomes unbearable, those same societies beg for someone to take the wheel. They beg for order. and in their desperation, they hand over their freedoms in exchange for comfort. The tyrant doesn't conquer them, he consoles them. Plato tried to offer a solution, not just a critique. He proposed that leadership should not be pursued like a prize. It should be accepted like a burden. Power, he believed, should reside in those least tempted by it, those trained in discipline, ethics, and clear thinking. He called them philosopher kings, not because he believed in monarchy, but because he understood the danger of unchecked emotion driving the crowd. He believed only those who had mastered their inner world could be trusted to guide the outer one. But who would choose a quiet, thoughtful, inconvenient truth over a loud, pleasing fantasy? The answer, all too often, is no one. And that's the tragedy. Because when you reward illusion, you multiply it. When you elevate charisma over competence, you teach future generations that truth doesn't matter, appearance does. When the system incentivizes performance over purpose, the wisest voices grow silent, retreating from the arena because they know they'll be booed, not heard. Plato wasn't writing fiction. He was sounding an alarm, and what he feared wasn't just the rise of one dangerous leader. He feared the gradual erosion of a society's immune system, the part that protects against lies, that fights for clarity, that upholds the difference between freedom and indulgence. We now live in a world where that immune system is nearly gone. Facts aren't debated, they're branded. Truth isn't discovered, it's marketed. The louder something sounds, the truer it seems. The more times it's repeated, the more it becomes a belief. Not because it's real, but because it's familiar. And once people become more loyal to their feelings than to reality, they will defend lies with the same passion they once reserved for justice. This is not accidental, it is designed. The platforms you use, the content you see, the outrage you feel, none of it is neutral. Everything is tailored to capture your emotion, not to expand your awareness. Because the system doesn't need you to be informed, it just needs you to be engaged. It thrives on your attention, not your wisdom. It survives by harvesting your reactions, not your reflections. So every headline is a lure. Every political debate is theater. Every election is a game of packaging. You're not choosing between truth and lies. You're choosing between presentations, between one illusion and another, between curated identities designed to echo back what you already believe. And in that feedback loop, democracy becomes a parody of itself. It retains the language of freedom while functioning as a highly controlled spectacle. You are still told that your vote matters. But what you're never told is that your vote has been shaped long before you cast it. The system didn't need to take your power. It only needed to shape what you desire. Plato understood this instinctively. He saw that when you let emotion govern policy, when you reward simplification over depth, when you select leaders based on familiarity, you create a loop where the wisest voices can never compete. Because wisdom doesn't pander. It challenges, it slows you down, it makes you uncomfortable. And discomfort doesn't win elections. Echoes do. That's why today, the philosopher is ignored. The honest man is mocked. The one who speaks truth without embellishment is dismissed as boring, robotic, or unelectable. Because in a system addicted to sensation, clarity is considered dull. So what are we left with? We are left with a democracy of echoes, a population convinced of its independence while marching in rhythm to the same drumbeat. We call this freedom, but it is anything but. True freedom is the ability to think clearly even when the world is screaming. It's the ability to step back and say, this feels good, but is it real? It's the courage to stand still in a storm of opinions and remain anchored in something deeper than the public mood. Plato warned that without this kind of inner strength, democracy would always devolve into something monstrous, not because people are evil, but because crowds are blind. The individual may seek truth, but the mass seeks comfort. And so the most dangerous leaders are those who know how to dress up chains as gifts. You are not in a democracy if every choice is pre-approved. You are not free if your ideas must pass through filters before they can be heard. You are not empowered if the options you receive are designed to keep you chasing shadows. And yet, the system tells you otherwise. It says, you picked this. It says, you wanted this. It says, this is your will. But was it? Or were you given a menu and told it was the world? Freedom doesn't mean unlimited options. It means clarity of mind. It means being able to say no when the whole crowd says yes. It means being able to resist the pull of applause and ask the deeper question, is this true, or is this just pleasing? Because the moment you stop asking that, the moment you trade discernment for dopamine, you are no longer a participant, you are a prop. You're no longer a citizen, you're a product. The system isn't threatened by your passion, it's fueled by it. It doesn't fear your voice, it monitors it. It doesn't need to silence you, it only needs to keep you busy. Busy reacting, busy voting, busy defending a side you never fully chose. And while you do, the real decisions, the ones that shape your future, your freedom, your children, are made elsewhere, quietly, permanently. That's why Plato's message wasn't just a warning, it was a call to consciousness. The most powerful resistance you can offer isn't shouting louder, it's seeing clearly. It's stepping out of the performance. It's refusing to clap just because the show is impressive. It's remembering that real change doesn't come from louder applause. It comes from the silent decision to stop playing along. The system can survive critics. It can't survive people who stop believing it. And that's what frightens it most. When you finally recognize the performance for what it is, the temptation is to look for a villain, a single face behind the curtain, a dark room where puppet strings are pulled by men in suits. But the truth is far more complicated and far more dangerous, because the machine isn't run by one hand. It's sustained by a system so interwoven with your everyday life that dismantling it requires more than rebellion. It demands awareness. It demands you reclaim your own perception before you try to fix anyone else's. The control isn't coming from a dictator shouting commands from a podium. It comes through what you see, what you don't see, what you think you chose, and what you've been trained to ignore. It's in the apps that predict your reactions. It's in the feeds that tailor outrage to your taste. It's in the speeches so perfectly rehearsed, they feel spontaneous. It's in the moments you think you're the hero of a fight you were never meant to win. Plato understood this more than 2,000 years ago. He saw clearly that the structure of democracy, without internal discipline, could become a loop of self-deception, a circle where the illusion of empowerment replaced actual understanding, a system that survives not through violence but through story. If the tale is told well enough, if the costume of freedom is sewn convincingly enough, no one needs to question what lies underneath. You think you're choosing, but you're picking between two faces of the same design. You think you're shouting truth, but your voice was already predicted, tested, filtered, and monetized. You believe you're resisting, but every reaction feeds the mechanism. And the more you react, the deeper the illusion grows. Because the greatest tool of control isn't fear, it's comfort. The kind that comes when you feel included, when you feel like you matter, when your opinion feels like a weapon. But what if that comfort is the prison? What if the ability to vote has been engineered to keep you just pacified enough that you don't notice the floor shifting beneath your feet? There are no chains, there are no guards, just an endless loop of choice that leads back to the same destination. No matter which side wins, the game stays the same, and you keep playing because the game tells you you're free. That's not democracy, that's theater. And the actors are brilliant. They've studied your habits, they've learned your fears, they've rehearsed the lines that sound just right to keep you invested. They cry on cue, they rage on schedule. They tell you they're different, but their scripts are written by the same hands. It's not about leadership anymore, it's about presentation. Image is king. Sincerity is a liability, complexity is a risk. The one who speaks with caution, with thoughtfulness, is labeled dull. The one who promises everything and questions nothing is hailed as a visionary. We reward charisma, we punish humility, and then we wonder why nothing changes. We are not governed by the wise. We are governed by the entertaining. And every time we confuse performance with leadership, the foundation weakens. This is what Plato feared. Not oppression in the classic sense, but the seduction of the masses into their own submission. When liberty is reduced to slogans, when debate is replaced by tribal loyalty, when truth becomes negotiable, society begins to erode from within. And the erosion is so quiet that by the time you notice it, the pillars are already gone. That's how democracy ends. Not with a gunshot, not with a coup, but with a standing ovation, because the audience never realized the show was about them. Plato offered an answer, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't emotional. It didn't fit into a chant or a bumper sticker. It wasn't designed to please anyone. He said only one thing could stop this descent, the elevation of wisdom. Not information, not opinions, but real, cultivated understanding. He imagined leaders who didn't campaign, who didn't want applause, who didn't shape themselves into slogans. Instead, he imagined minds shaped by philosophy, by patience, by truth, even when that truth was painful. He believed power should be given to those who didn't crave it, because the ones who hunger for authority are the last who should wield it. And yet, here we are, led by those who perfected the art of craving. We've confused freedom with noise. We've mistaken validation for insight. We think truth is a matter of feelings and integrity is whatever gets the most retweets. But what good is 1,000 voices if none are grounded? What good is a vote if it only affirms your favorite fiction? The tragedy of modern democracy isn't that people are uninformed, it's that they're overfed with content and starving for meaning, surrounded by messages yet untouched by truth. The philosopher today doesn't stand on stage. He writes in corners, he speaks in echoes. He's overlooked not because he's wrong, but because he doesn't flatter. And the crowd, trained to cheer only what feels good, has no patience for the man who makes them think. That's how the system survives, not by silencing the thinker, but by drowning him out. You scroll past wisdom because it's not exciting. You skip past depth because it's not fast. You crave the emotional high more than the clarity of insight. And in that craving, you hand your mind to the very thing that keeps you spinning. This isn't about choosing a side. It's about waking up. Because once you realize the performance, you can't pretend anymore. You can't clap along. You can't nod just to fit in. Something in you changes, not loudly, not publicly, but quietly, irrevocably. You begin to ask different questions. You begin to resist without shouting. You begin to see without being told what to look at. That's where real freedom lives, not in the box you check every 4 years, not in the team you root for, not in the flag you wave or the anthem you sing, but in the moment you choose to think for yourself. When you choose stillness over noise, when you choose understanding over rage, when you stop echoing and start reflecting. That doesn't make you better. It makes you dangerous. Because the system doesn't know what to do with someone who can't be swayed by sentiment. Someone who isn't reactive, someone who's not trying to win but trying to see. Plato's call wasn't for revolution, it was for restoration. A return to a kind of citizenship that can't be manipulated by applause. A kind of mind that doesn't follow the herd, because it knows the herd isn't always going somewhere worth following. He asked us not to fight the crowd, but to become immune to it. Because once you see clearly, you stop needing the validation of the masses. And when you don't need that, the system can no longer use it against you. You can still live within the machinery without becoming part of it. You can still listen without believing. You can still vote without illusion. You can walk into the ritual with your eyes open. And when you do, everything changes. Not because the world changes overnight, but because you do. That's the shift Plato believed was possible, the only one that truly matters. Not a change in rulers, a change in the ruled. You can't dismantle the system by yelling at it, but you can starve it of what it feeds on, your blind faith, your distracted attention, your borrowed opinions. You can say no without making a sound. You can resist by choosing truth over trend, thought over reaction, silence over noise. That's not weakness, that's power. Because a person who can't be manipulated can't be controlled. And that's where the system breaks, not when the crowd gets louder, but when someone, somewhere, chooses clarity in the middle of chaos. So when the world hands you two options that feel the same, step back. When a politician speaks in riddles of reassurance, ask what they're not saying. When everyone around you is clapping, look for the one who isn't. Find the mind that doesn't need a spotlight, the voice that doesn't need a microphone, because that's where the truth usually hides. And once you hear it, even once, you can't unhear it. You can't go back to the comfort of the crowd. You can't re-enter the theater without noticing the strings, the props, the rehearsed emotions. You can sit in your seat, but your mind won't be fooled again. And in that moment, you've already won, not by changing the world, but by reclaiming yourself. Because democracy at its best was never about mass emotion. It was about individual conscience, not about feeling powerful, but about becoming wise. And wisdom, unlike popularity, doesn't need applause. So if you're awake now, stay awake. Don't get louder, get clearer. Don't try to win the game, walk away from the table. Don't scream for attention, listen for truth. Because in the end, they can count your votes, but they can't own your mind. And that, quietly, slowly, unshakably, is how freedom begins. And this time it doesn't come from a ballot. It comes from within.